Prince William had spent years preparing to inherit a throne defined by duty, restraint, and silent sacrifice. Then, behind the closed doors of a Windsor legal chamber, two royal solicitors broke the seal on a document no living heir was expected to see. Its contents did not remove William from the succession. They did something far more explosive. They changed the conditions under which he would become king, and finally proved that his deepest fears had been justified. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William did not celebrate. He sat across from Dame Eleanor Ashcombe as she placed the declaration before him and watched his expression tighten. A constitutional declaration is a formal written instruction governing how royal authority operates during a crisis. This one carried the signatures of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. It ordered the heir to oversee royal residences, senior appointments, protected archives, emergency finances, and succession planning, if the reigning sovereign could no longer protect the crown's continuity. The prince read the final paragraph twice. His fingers closed around the table's edge, and his voice dropped when he asked Eleanor why the document had remained sealed. Her answer came from a recorded legal memorandum attached to the file. The late queen feared that revealing it early would deepen the conflict it was designed to prevent. William understood why the discovery mattered. It did not change the legal line of succession, meaning the established order deciding who inherits the throne. Charles would remain king, yet his son could gain operational control before accession, leaving the monarch sovereign in title, while the future king secured the institution around him. Charles received the authenticated account at Buckingham Palace from the Lord Chamberlain, the senior palace officer responsible for coordinating the sovereign's official household. He removed his glasses, placed them beside an untouched cup of tea, and remained silent. The room felt smaller. The king had long treated William's warnings about blurred authority, household interference, weak financial safeguards, and private loyalties as signs of impatience. Now Elizabeth's documented words confirmed that she had shared those fears. The final clause carried the deepest threat. The safeguard required no abdication and no death. 3 appointed legal guardians only had to agree unanimously that the crown's stability was at risk. William turned to the sealed appendix, expecting judges and constitutional officers. Instead, the first name struck him with personal force: Princess Anne. But before William could understand how much authority the document placed within his reach, he had to face the people whose futures would be transformed by its existence. The sealed declaration was written in legal language, but its consequences were painfully human. For William, it offered proof that his private warnings had never been paranoia. For Charles, it threatened to turn a lifetime of waiting into a reign overshadowed by supervision. And for Queen Camilla, the document raised a colder possibility: that every influence she had carefully built around the sovereign could disappear with a single unanimous decision. William carried the sealed copy into Adelaide Cottage without triumph. Catherine saw the strain and waited as he stood near the fireplace, turning pages without reading them. The crown's operational affairs meant the daily systems keeping the monarchy functioning, from staffing and property to money and future planning. Control of those systems could shape the next reign before a new king appeared publicly. The prince admitted that being proven right hurt more than being ignored. He had spent years warning his father about blurred authority, yet every warning made him look impatient, disloyal, almost hungry for the throne. Catherine reminded him that preparation was not betrayal, but he answered that Charles had never heard the difference. His loyalty demanded silence. His duty demanded that he speak. Both choices had wounded him. Charles faced another fear. He had waited most of his life to become sovereign, and he viewed royal judgment as inseparable from the person wearing the crown. Camilla had become his closest advisor, shaping access, schedules, staffing discussions, and the atmosphere around him. When he explained the declaration in a recorded conversation, preserved by the Royal Legal Office, she removed a bracelet with shaking fingers and asked whether William could overrule her household. The king did not answer. He knew the question reached beyond staff. If the guardians activated the document, Camilla's influence over residences, appointments, and succession planning could shrink overnight. The queen consort placed the bracelet on the table, and stared at it, as though one small object could steady everything else. Then the supporting memorandum deepened the wound. Prince Philip had written that William was the family member best able to separate personal emotion from institutional necessity during a constitutional emergency. A memorandum is a formal written record explaining advice or judgment. Elizabeth added her own warning. A sovereign surrounded by advisors who protected his comfort instead of challenging him could endanger the monarchy before the danger became public. Anne had known a safeguard existed. She had never known what would activate it. Her silence was no longer passive. It was a burden waiting to be explained. And the reason Anne had guarded that silence began with one private royal ceremony that changed the relationship between William and his father forever. Long before the solicitors broke the seal, the monarchy had already crossed a hidden line. It happened not during a public scandal or a televised argument, but inside the quiet formality of Windsor Castle. A ceremony intended to demonstrate unity instead exposed a dangerous fracture between the king and his heir. Those present would later remember one small gesture, the closing of a folder, as the moment Queen Elizabeth's safeguard became inevitable. William had pressed for clearer boundaries throughout the monarch's final years. He wanted the sovereign's private household, the heir's duties, and advisors shaping long-term crown decisions kept separate. Confused authority could leave his family unprotected during an emergency and allow private loyalties to influence national continuity. Charles heard something different. He believed his son was forcing a corporate system onto a monarchy built on trust, rank, and the sovereign's right to choose his circle. February 2021 became the breaking point. During a Windsor investiture rehearsal, William opened a succession planning folder he had been told to review. An investiture is a formal ceremony where royal honors are presented, while succession planning prepares the institution for a change of sovereign. The prince discovered that the folder had been revised without his knowledge. His authority to approve emergency arrangements for the Wales household and his children had vanished. William waited until the rehearsal ended. With no cameras or aides between them, he asked Charles who authorized the change. The king closed the folder, pushed it across the table, and told his son that an heir must wait until power is given, rather than reach for it early. The words landed harder than the gesture. William's concern had been Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. Charles treated it as ambition. Elizabeth heard raised voices from the adjoining library. She entered as William contained his anger, and watched her son refuse to reopen the file. Later, the Queen requested both versions from the royal archivist, the official responsible for preserving the monarchy's records. An archive note recorded her concern that family conflict was interfering with preparation. That evening, Elizabeth summoned Prince Philip and 2 constitutional solicitors. She ordered a declaration protecting the heir's operational role whenever personal resentment blocked succession planning. Philip supported the instruction in a signed memorandum, warning that delay could turn a private wound into an institutional crisis. Days later, the monarch called Anne. She told her daughter that one day she might have to choose between protecting a sovereign's feelings and protecting the crown's future. Anne gave no answer. She carried the warning. That choice had now arrived, and when Anne entered the king's private audience room, there would be no ceremony left to hide behind. The meeting began with protocol. It ended with a father accusing his son of waiting for his weakness. Charles entered determined to preserve his authority, while William arrived carrying the words of 2 people they had both loved and feared disappointing. Between them sat the sealed declaration, silent but devastating. For the first time, the battle over the monarchy's future was no longer hidden inside files, schedules, or whispered warnings. Anne closed the door herself. She had brought Charles and William into the king's private audience room at Buckingham Palace, a chamber where the sovereign receives people for confidential meetings. No aides remained. The declaration lay in the center of the table, turning family pain into a question of royal survival. If they failed to agree, outsiders would decide how much power the monarch could exercise. William spoke first. He did not demand activation of the safeguard, the emergency mechanism created to protect continuity when normal cooperation collapsed. The prince asked his father to recognize the document voluntarily and divide responsibilities before the legal guardians intervened. Charles heard surrender hidden inside compromise. He accused his son of becoming arrogant now that Elizabeth and Philip had vindicated him. The future king rose. He placed both hands on the table and said he had spent years trying to prevent a crisis, not inherit one. Charles struck back, asking whether every warning had been preparation or impatience dressed as duty. Then his anger cracked. The king admitted that each demand for oversight felt like proof that William considered him incapable. His voice lowered as he asked whether Elizabeth had ever trusted him to reign alone. Anne did not soften the answer. Drawing from her mother's documented instructions, she told Charles that the Queen trusted his intentions, but feared his isolation. She explained that the declaration was never designed to punish him. It existed because he had rejected safeguards that required cooperation, allowing hurt to threaten institutional stability. Camilla opened the door before anyone could respond. She had learned through a briefing from her private secretary that her household was being discussed. Charles asked her to remain, but Anne closed the declaration and told the Queen Consort that only the sovereign, the heir, and the named guardians could debate activation. Camilla looked toward the king. He did not defend her place in the room. Charles rejected William's proposal. He pushed the document away and refused to divide authority under pressure. Anne understood what his refusal meant. She would now summon the remaining guardians. With compromise rejected, the future of the monarchy passed from a wounded father and son into the hands of three people empowered to judge them both. Royal power is usually displayed through uniforms, ceremonies, and ancient titles. But the authority capable of changing William's path to the throne belonged to three people seated around an unremarkable oak table. They carried no crowns, they commanded no cheering crowds. Yet with three signatures, they could transfer the monarchy's daily control away from a reigning king and place its future in the hands of his son. Anne paused outside the Windsor chamber before the hearing began. An old photograph showed her beside Charles as children, years before duty turned affection into judgment. She touched the frame, steadied her breathing, and walked inside, knowing one signature could protect her brother's pride, or protect the crown's future. The sealed appendix named Princess Anne, retired Supreme Court Justice Lord Andrew Pembroke, and Royal Solicitor Dame Eleanor Ashcombe, as the only guardians authorized to activate the Transitional Declaration. A Transitional Declaration is an emergency instruction that shifts specific duties without removing the sovereign. Their task was narrow but devastating. Decide whether the king's household, health, advisors, or decision-making structure had placed royal continuity at serious risk. Eleanor faced William first. She asked whether he could accept authority without humiliating his father. The prince answered that he would not use the document as punishment, but he would no longer allow family discomfort to weaken the institution. His response mattered because revenge would fracture public trust, while hesitation could leave succession planning exposed again. Pembroke opened the evidence file. The records showed delayed financial reviews, cancelled succession briefings, restricted archive access, and household appointments made without the heir's required consultation. Each act seemed small alone. Together, they revealed a pattern. Preparation had been blocked whenever it threatened the comfort of the existing court. Then Eleanor uncovered the handwritten note. Elizabeth had added one final sentence beneath the declaration. The heir must not be made powerless merely because the sovereign finds preparation painful. The words were preserved in the authenticated archive record, leaving no room for interpretation and no shelter for denial. Pembroke concluded that the legal threshold had been met. Eleanor agreed. 2 signatures appeared on the ruling, but nothing changed until Anne decided. She looked at William, then at the empty chair reserved for Charles, and held the pen above the page. Anne remembered her mother's warning and understood why this moment mattered. If she refused, personal loyalty would overrule the safeguard Elizabeth had created. If she signed, Charles would remain king, but William would gain the power his father had fought to withhold today. And when Anne finally lowered her pen, the sound of one signature carried through the palace like a door closing on the old order. There was no balcony announcement and no trumpet call. Yet by sunrise, the machinery of the monarchy had changed. William was still the Prince of Wales. Charles was still the king. But every major operational decision now required the heir's approval. Staff who had served one center of power discovered that a second authority had become active overnight. And inside the royal apartments, the cost of that transition became painfully personal. Anne's signature activated the Guardian's ruling before dawn. The order transferred oversight of strategic appointments, succession planning, royal archives, emergency finances, and protected crown residences to William. Protected crown residences are royal properties held for the institution, rather than treated as ordinary private homes. That distinction mattered because whoever controlled access, repairs, records, and staffing could shape the next reign long before the throne itself changed hands. Charles remained sovereign. He would continue state audiences, constitutional duties, public ceremonies, and meetings with ministers. Yet the king could no longer alter the structures affecting William's future reign without his son's approval. The change preserved continuity, but it also placed a visible limit around royal power, and Charles felt that limit the moment a red dispatch box arrived. The king lifted the lid and found the first operational papers waiting for two names. A dispatch box is the locked red case used to carry official documents to the sovereign. Charles saw William's counter-signature line printed beneath his own, stared at it, then closed the box without reading further. His son had not taken the crown. Somehow, that made the loss feel more intimate. Camilla faced the same reality from another direction. Her private secretary explained that household recommendations involving crown property must now pass through William's office. The queen consort dismissed the staff member with a clipped nod, but once the door closed, she remained seated in silence. Her influence had depended on access. Now, access itself belonged to a system she could no longer direct. William moved carefully. Rather than dismiss Charles's advisors, the prince ordered a 30-day review and froze new appointments. The decision mattered because a purge would have looked like revenge, while restraint showed that his goal was stability. Then he reopened a restricted succession archive containing Elizabeth's correspondence about George, Charlotte, Louis, and the preparation of the next generation. One envelope changed the mood again. It was addressed to Charles and William, to be read together when neither can command the other. Neither man could ignore what those words demanded. Anne had transferred power, but Elizabeth was now summoning both men beyond power. The declaration had changed their authority, but the unopened letter would decide whether it also destroyed the bond between them. For days, Charles refused to read the letter. William refused to open it without him. The monarchy could continue under legal safeguards, but father and son remained trapped on opposite sides of the same wound. Then, late one evening at Windsor, Charles entered the library without staff or ceremony. William was already waiting. Between them lay Elizabeth's final attempt to save not only the crown, but the family expected to carry it. Charles closed the door behind him. Anne, the solicitors, courtiers, and private secretaries had all been excluded, leaving no institution to absorb the pain for them. For once, neither rank nor resentment could answer for them. A courtier is a senior person who serves within the royal household, but none stood nearby now. The king took the chair opposite William, and neither man reached for the envelope at first. William finally broke the seal. Elizabeth's letter explained that the declaration had never been designed to accelerate her grandson's accession or publicly diminish her son. Accession means the moment an heir formally becomes sovereign. She had created the safeguard to prevent uncertainty during transition, because confusion over authority could endanger government confidence and expose the family before it was ready. Charles read the opening page twice. Then he admitted that he had mistaken preparation for impatience. The king had spent most of his life waiting to be trusted, so every request from William had sounded like another person measuring how soon he might fail. His confession did not excuse the obstruction, but it exposed the fear beneath it. The prince answered without anger. He said he had never wanted authority early. He wanted permission to prepare without being treated as a rival, especially when Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis would carry the consequences of any failure. Silence had protected his father's dignity, but it had also left his own family vulnerable. Elizabeth's final judgment cut through them both. In the authenticated letter, she wrote that Charles possessed imagination and compassion, while William possessed the discipline to secure what came afterward. The monarchy would survive only when those strengths stopped competing. Charles removed his signet ring and placed it beside the pages. A signet ring bears a personal emblem and traditionally represents identity and authority. He offered to formalize William's operational role publicly, refusing to let rumors describe the change as a secret seizure of power. William accepted. Together, they prepared a statement affirming Charles as sovereign and the prince as guardian of continuity. They left the library aligned, but the world would decide what that alignment meant. By morning, a private settlement between two men would become a public judgment on the entire reign. For days, Charles refused to read the letter. William refused to open it without him. The monarchy could continue under legal safeguards, but father and son remained trapped on opposite sides of the same wound. Then, late one evening at Windsor, Charles entered the library without staff or ceremony. William was already waiting. Between them lay Elizabeth's final attempt to save not only the crown, but the family expected to carry it. Charles closed the door behind him. Anne, the solicitors, courtiers, and private secretaries had all been excluded, leaving no institution to absorb the pain for them. For once, neither rank nor resentment could answer for them. A courtier is a senior person who serves within the royal household, but none stood nearby now. The king took the chair opposite William, and neither man reached for the envelope at first. William finally broke the seal. Elizabeth's letter explained that the declaration had never been designed to accelerate her grandson's accession or publicly diminish her son. Accession means the moment an heir formally becomes sovereign. She had created the safeguard to prevent uncertainty during transition, because confusion over authority could endanger government confidence and expose the family before it was ready. Charles read the opening page twice. Then he admitted that he had mistaken preparation for impatience. The king had spent most of his life waiting to be trusted, so every request from William had sounded like another person measuring how soon he might fail. His confession did not excuse the obstruction, but it exposed the fear beneath it. The prince answered without anger. He said he had never wanted authority early. He wanted permission to prepare without being treated as a rival, especially when Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis would carry the consequences of any failure. Silence had protected his father's dignity, but it had also left his own family vulnerable. Elizabeth's final judgment cut through them both. In the authenticated letter, she wrote that Charles possessed imagination and compassion, while William possessed the discipline to secure what came afterward. The monarchy would survive only when those strengths stopped competing. Charles removed his signet ring and placed it beside the pages. A signet ring bears a personal emblem and traditionally represents identity and authority. He offered to formalize William's operational role publicly, refusing to let rumors describe the change as a secret seizure of power. William accepted. Together, they prepared a statement affirming Charles as sovereign and the prince as guardian of continuity. They left the library aligned, but the world would decide what that alignment meant. By morning, a private settlement between two men would become a public judgment on the entire reign. The palace statement was only 3 paragraphs long, but Britain read it as a constitutional earthquake. It confirmed that Charles remained king, while William assumed formal responsibility for the monarchy's long-term continuity. Supporters called it preparation. Critics called it a silent regency. Yet one image captured the public mood more powerfully than any legal explanation. Father and son leaving Windsor together, neither walking ahead of the other. Buckingham Palace released the announcement before the morning broadcasts. It confirmed that William would oversee strategic continuity, succession preparation, protected archives, and long-term crown administration. A regency is an arrangement in which another person performs royal duties when a sovereign cannot do so. But this was different. Charles remained fully king. The new structure existed to strengthen the institution, not replace the monarch. And the statement stressed that Elizabeth and Philip had designed it before Charles accepted it. William watched the first reports at Kensington Palace, with Catherine beside him. A presenter described the declaration as proof that the prince's warnings had been justified. He lowered the television volume and said, "Vindication should never require his father's humiliation." Catherine understood the conflict. Public support could secure William's authority, but celebration would make reconciliation look false and turn duty into victory over Charles. Charles faced the headlines with less control. Newspapers called the arrangement a shadow transfer of power, meaning authority had shifted without a formal change of sovereign. The king's advisors urged him to release a defensive personal statement distancing himself from William. He refused. Anger tightened his voice, yet he would not deepen the fracture merely to protect his pride. Then one front page captured the nation's attention. The Daily Chronicle printed the sealed declaration beside William's photograph beneath the headline, "The Queen's Final Safeguard." William was right. Outside Windsor Castle, a crowd gathered beneath the round tower. Some carried portraits of Elizabeth. One handwritten placard read, "Preparation is not betrayal." A private wound had become a public verdict. For supporters, the sign defended preparation. For critics, it exposed how the palace had resisted change. Either way, William could no longer be dismissed as an anxious heir. Britain now saw him as the man guarding what came next. Charles saw the crowd before leaving Windsor. His staff prepared separate departures, but the king rejected them. He asked William to walk beside him through the castle courtyard. The prince hesitated, then agreed. Neither man would lead, neither would follow. Their shared pace would say what 3 paragraphs could not. And as the gates opened, the monarchy's verdict would no longer be found in the sealed document, but in the way a father and son chose to carry its consequences. Prince William emerged vindicated, but he did not emerge victorious over his father. The sealed declaration proved that his warnings had been serious, his preparation necessary, and his loyalty misunderstood. Yet its final achievement was not the power it transferred. It was the conflict it ended. Charles remained king. William became the recognized protector of what would follow. And the crown survived because neither man demanded that the other be publicly defeated. Charles made the new balance permanent. During a private audience, he signed a royal warrant recognizing William's authority over continuity planning, protected estates, emergency finance, royal archives, and the preparation of the next generation. A royal warrant is a formal instruction carrying the sovereign's approval. This one mattered because it transformed a temporary safeguard into an accepted structure, giving the future king responsibility without forcing an early accession. The line of succession did not change. William received no invented title, and he did not replace his father. Instead, the prince stopped waiting outside decisions that would shape Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. He could now protect the monarchy he would inherit, while Charles continued the public and constitutional work of the sovereign. For the monarchy, that distinction mattered. Stability no longer depended on silence, and authority no longer had to be confused with obedience. The king then faced the wound behind everything. He handed William the original succession folder from their 2021 confrontation and admitted that he had mistaken preparation for ambition. The apology came without performance. The prince accepted the folder, but rejected calls to remove Camilla's senior staff or expose every record examined by the guardians. Reform, he insisted, could not become revenge. Anne carried the heaviest silence. William thanked her for signing the declaration, despite the cost to her relationship with Charles. She answered through a documented account preserved by the Royal Legal Office that Elizabeth never intended her daughter to choose one man over another. The Queen had forced both men to choose the crown over themselves. Charles and William appeared together at Windsor one final time. Before stepping forward, the king placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The future king paused, then matched his father's pace. Vindication had changed his path, but restraint defined what he did with it. Preparation was not betrayal. Loyalty sometimes required challenge. Duty had finally become stronger than pride. The document had been sealed to protect the future, but when it was finally opened, it saved the present and gave both the king and his heir a path forward together. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.